Welcome to another episode by Plinko Solutions, a project and production brought to you around AI and accessibility. Today's a really cool one. We're going to dive really deep into the world of agentic browsing. What is agentic browsing? I'm talking about when AI runs through the browser on behalf of you. This has existed typically behind the scenes, kind of through this black box effect, through for a while, through browser use. If you're familiar with ChatGPT agent mode now, you're probably visualizing what I'm talking about, where it shows up a bit of a window and you just kind of run through it, or the AI runs through it rather. That's evolved, right? As of April 2025, we're pretty much introduced to a new way of doing it. This way is basically allowing something called echo. So if you're more on the technical side, you'll appreciate this. But echo is essentially putting a machine learning layer on top of the AI that's already running through the browser. There's a few visualizations of this that I've seen basically show it the best. So if you're non-technical, what this would look like, I'll show you here. So they have all these kind of marketing and showcasing what it kind of looks like to you. But what's happening on the technical side is actually where I'm most enthused, because you'll find that with ChatGPT agent mode, it runs out of memory. It kind of just runs, I don't want to say headlessly, but mindlessly, I would say. This one provides a natural interface that the AI is interacting with, that the AI is trained on interacting with, and then allowing it to then actually execute. This is how most algorithmic kind of technology works, especially in the hardware space. So being able to bring this into, the computer is really cool, right? The PC, the personal computer. One piece about it, it exists mostly within appliances at this current point. You have a fridge that sees what's inside of the fridge, analyzes those groceries, and then sends it to another processing model to be, make sense of that. We can now do all of that fun noise, on the desktop or laptop, right? So what does that change actually look like? And how can I best kind of illustrate it for you? So before really ironing out what this looks like on the technical piece in even more detail, I would like us to kind of understand where we're at and I want to say landscape of things. So most people use AI as a search engine. They pick it up and they say, what can I learn more with? How can I, instead of Google, research something? What that's built on the premise of is a research framework. It's how people actually approach things. So before, the tools, they're very rule-based. They'll take your query and they'll say, okay, cool, this is what you're looking for. Let me go search for that. And it does the searching on your behalf. It's very predictable. We've had it for a while in the form of chatbots. Right, but when it finds something outside of its context or outside of its understanding, it can break. So enter in the kind of co-pilot era, right? So the smart routers, the ones that actually have machine learning in it, and it actually learns from data. It improves the request, right? And this is typically where software kind of began to really grow. It grew before, obviously. I don't want to discount the dot-com bubble and everything before, because, tech has been growing at insane rates, regardless of the era. I think what helps you kind of understand this contextually is that most software that you build with this kind of premise takes months, right? Sometimes years. And now, with the new current landscape, right, that's become more commercially available, meaning it costs significantly less. It's significantly quicker to build software, or even specifically features within softwares that aid business process, right? They actually help you speed up things, right? So an example of that being the code interpreter, MCP protocols, if you're not familiar with that, which is basically allowing easier connectivity, more stability, and consistency across the commercially available artificial intelligence. So in this piece, what I'm going to be going towards is not vibe coding, right? It's not, how can I build more software faster? Because that's just there are horses in that race, and I am no stallion in that, no Ferrari. But however, so where does that come to life commercially, right? In terms of the different pieces with artificial intelligence. Well, if you're commercially using it, you've noticed now that it's much more than a search engine. It's an intelligence system. It's something that you work with in production while you're creating. And in doing that, you're able to kind of see what this thing is actually capable of, right? And that's often under talked about, which is why I'm doing this whole thing right now, right? So what am I hinting towards? Artificial intelligence, instead of operating by itself, can have artificial intelligence working with it in a specific trained way, right? So that enables the power of self-improvement. Now, I'm just going to get existential for a second without being dramatic. What I'm about to uncover in these next 30 days with what I'm working on has a very real risk of displacement, especially when it comes to agentic web browsers. Reason being, there are people in the world that make their entire living just on clicking, dragging, copying, analyzing text. And that is okay. That is good. That's a skill. That's a muscle you've learned. And now that you're able to identify that, my hopes in the work that I'm doing going forward is that it inspires more access around what AI can do to empower you, right? Whether or not I share this in terms of how this thing works, there are going to be corporations, there are going to be culture, there's going to be people at stake that will use this kind of technology, right? Having AI work for you in different layers and use it for malice, use it for kind of practice. And that's not what I want to empower by any means. I'm looking to empower more of the people that are being, currently stressed by the financial, circumstances of the world, being in a business that lacks business infrastructure, working with leadership and management that, there's crosswires, there's chaos, there's confusion. AI has a very real capability and capacity to help you in those situations, right? So what I'm sharing is more of process towards that. Typically, what we're going to be looking at in these next 30 days is, I can't emphasize enough, it's important, almost significantly to the point where any other approach to AI doesn't make sense. Treat it like an intelligence system, right? The accuracy, the experimental nature of it, the power of it will continue to evolve. And if you're not taught to be critical about that, and not even just academic, but to look at these things and not treat it like it's gospel, because they do hallucinate, right? These are tools, these are processes. And if you're not tech, if you're not privy, especially to academic research, your usual source of insight around AI is from media. And we all know, without, again, too existential, what media pushes for. It's for your attention. It's for your power, right? It's more of a, I don't want to call it a distraction, because that discredits the capacity. And also what I'm doing here with, YouTube. There's a very real opportunity of access. And that's what I'm here to kind of, showcase. So that all being said, TED Talk over. Let me talk you guys through where the magic is. So, like I said, if you're not tech privy and you don't know much about the academic research behind this, you're more than likely have been in the dark around agentic browsers. So that comes with its own problems, because media is incentivized to more so catch your attention than it is to educate you on possibility. We don't have a lot of resources around that. So let's get into that. This is going to be a 10-episode series framed with a 5-day marathon at the end of the 3 weeks. I'm also going to be sharing a full 30-day program, which you can complete asynchronously and synchronously. If you're interested in that, hang out to the later half of this video and we'll dive into it. So with that, the next little bit is going to be showcasing more so about business infrastructure. So when I talk about business infrastructure, that can mean a number of things. In my line of work, I mainly have built AI and automation as a point of business processing, meaning, anytime you have data entry, anytime you have emails that are on repetition, features that you find, businesses doing quite frequently, and really technology that you're just kind of, hot potato tossing around. There are ways to maximize this. And that's often been my past decade learning experience, is that, these things enter the market, but the actual utility and the frame for what it can do for you is often lost in context. So when I speak about business infrastructure, what I'm really referring to is what makes a business run, right? And this can be, extrapolated into, as you can imagine, absolute insanity. I think one piece that helps me kind of, I don't want to say understand, but illustrate it the best is by breaking it into this leadership layer, this management layer, and the implementation layer, right? So currently, if you're familiar with my previous work on software architecture, you'll understand that teams and human capital is really the core responsibility, single source of truth for any of these, right? They just know things that no machine, or at least in my current, from what I've seen, can read your mind and extrapolate everything from. So what that requires you to do is to have directives, meaning you have to delegate work through mission and objective so that people actually do it. If you don't communicate what needs to be done, it doesn't get done. So that's what the leadership level is all about. It's communicating what needs to happen, right, at a department level, and then ensuring that the processes, the standard operating procedures are all in place to make that possible. The managers are the people, the layer that are actively ensuring things get done, managing time, managing resources. That's what it comes down to. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be sales, it could be research, it could be content, it could be whatever it is. If you're managing anything to any capacity, what you're looking for is resource, capacity, and how well does that measure against the goals and objectives, right? How well does that meet what leadership is looking for? And that's what we're looking at. So when we introduce, before I even get into AI in the equation, introducing these kind of worker, kind of like execution level business processes, this speaks to the art of discovery, asking real questions, looking at capabilities, and also understanding what it means to bring these into reality. So as you're looking into this and as I'm explaining this and you get excited about sharing it, as happy as I am to kind of support you in that, I do want to lay that critical lens once again. This is research purposes, okay? Without sounding too dramatic. As soon as you layer AI into this, very real risk come into the equation. Let's talk about that. So, all right, bear with me because this may seem theoretical, but I promise you, if you give me the next 5 to 10 minutes of your attention here, you'll have a light bulb go off that I've seen go off for so many people that I've worked with, and I've seen these limitations. And I'm like, if you frame it in the world that it's an intelligent system, which means it's a product of the mind. If it's a product of the mind, meaning that it works by natural language and thinking, then in order to actually work with it as an assistant, what do we need? We need like an actual system in place, like an actual organization, I would say. Okay, but we're one mind. We're only, we're thinking, right? If you've had this instance where you're using multiple ChatGPT here, DeepSeek, Claude, Anthropic, you have all these different models thinking with you, you understand what I'm about to describe. You're creating a echo chamber, almost like a faculty, a conversation, right? Amongst these different tools by copying from one, putting it into the other, slapping it on top of that, and it becomes an assembly line, right? It's AI working together. And we do it manually without even thinking about it. So if you've explored AI in this capacity, then you've already stepped into a world that is beyond just using it as a search query or a search engine, right? It becomes a system that you can think with. So what does that impose? So I would say 3 things. So what does that impose? It implies, I would say, that your imagination determines your capacity to work with these different thinking models in alignment, right? In parallel, you would say. So what does that kind of, like, when I say imagination, you're like, okay, so you're saying I just need to think bigger? And that's exactly what I'm saying. So what is imagination? It's a unique expression of individual conception and coherent comprehension. Fancy way of saying imagination is your capacity to communicate what you are thinking of, right? What you are imagining. So if you're working with language models and thinking models that also are imagining things, what does that imply? Now, I'm not going to get too biblical. Of course, this next part you can disagree with. I got this from Myron Golden as kind of a token. So if man's image was made in the image of God, and if you're assuming God's kind of original purpose in sort of his like creative power is to create and naturalize, like it's one of the first things, if not the first thing he did in the Bible, right? Or whatever religious text. So in understanding that, right, that leads you down this kind of land of 4 levels of value. So again, Myron Golden, an amazing resource if you're interested in this kind of stuff. I'm just glazing over it just to kind of show you the thought process. Even if you don't relate to the top part here, this next piece is really important. So again, I'm only illustrating this because mostly for illustrative purpose. Myron Golden also showcased it, and I thought like once I understood it, it allowed me to approach pretty much everything differently. So the 4 levels of value. The first one is implementation. So it's multiplying your muscle by time, right? That can earn you anywhere between 0 to 100K. Unification is by multiplying your capacity to manage and time. That can earn you anywhere between 100K and $1 million. Communication is being able to take your mind and your language skills and multiply that by time, right? That can give you returns anywhere from truly $1 million to hundreds of millions. And imagination being the top of it is your mind over strategy over time, right? Because the time is going to pass anyways. And as you kind of come to grips with that, you realize your mind and your strategy, your vision, your foresight over time is really all you have. Direction over speed, right? So with that in mind, why is that all important, especially for the AI side? So when I speak about imagination, there's a conceptual awareness around what that means. It's like you close your eyes almost and you can intentionally pursue an image, a visual in your mind. I do typically like a live workshop with this stuff. So there's tons of practices to kind of show you this next concept, which is introception. So introception, what it is your ability to visualize what's happening inside of your body at a given moment. So we introduce the time component. You see how that's related now. You introduce your not just imagination, right? Because that's, strategy, skills, muscle. You take all of that and you start to put it into your being over time, right? You become more by actually embodying what you imagined for yourself. So if that part, when you kind of take that in, you're understanding focal vision, right? It's your actual lens, your filter that you look at the world and you see the world through, right? You see what it can be. And I think that's one of the most empowering pieces around AI is it allows you an increased capacity to imagine, visualize, and create. So what does that really mean? It means you can now, with the assistance of a thinking model, offload the capacity to remember things. Obviously, still have your own memory as a human, but you do now have a technical capacity to offload that. You could do it through all sorts of means. You also have a capacity now to prioritize things. You had that as a human, right? It's organic intelligence first, but through focal vision, by giving it directive, by giving it strategy over time, you then are able to anticipate and know when things are going to happen because you've prioritized it and you've delegated it. What are the missing components in order to do that? It's the how and who, right? Who does it and how do they do it? Enter in agentic browsers. This piece is really where, when I show you it, you start to understand more and more. So I'm going to do rapid fire, just kind of take you guys through it. These are the different domains in which agentic web browsing changes things from before. Up until this point, right, as you can imagine with the different layers of AI that I articulated earlier, you basically have this siloed experience, this individual experience with artificial intelligence. Now, when you have it speaking to each other, we experience something called perspective. This is the last piece of theory, and then I'll be able to throw in some cool visuals for you guys. This will really make things click. So Okay, I lied. There's two pieces of theory left. Zone of proximal development, and then the last piece, which is perspective. So, zone of proximal development. What is this? There are 3 layers in which people learn, right? So if you're not familiar with the concept, you have no idea what it's about, you don't think this is for you. You're probably hearing all this, and I haven't said jack about anything technical. I've purely been talking about mind and what you can create with that. Which for some are like, all right, this is rudimentary, I'm going to skip through 1.2 times speed. But then you come to realize that when you start to move fast, there are gaps and you start to pick up a lot of material. So what does that imply, right? I'm going to be sharing a 30-day program where you can do this, right? And have a full understanding of how to build this for yourself. From ground zero, non-technical business owners and managers, owner operators. If you're somebody that creates and you're overwhelmed and you're just kind of, your mind is running its strategy, your muscle is, I don't want to say worn because we're all strong, but if you've been going and going and going, this program's for you. So my goal, the premise, is to provide you something that you can do without guidance. However, that doesn't mean I don't offer guidance. That's pretty much my line of work, and that's what I do daily. So second piece of theory was a little bit of plug at the end. I hope you guys enjoyed that. The last piece, which I promise is a lot more engaging. And the reason I showed that out is just to kind of, echo pretty much what I was saying earlier on. All right, what is all this crazy caveman stuff? Let me take you guys through it. So when I speak about organization, there are a few things that that typically relates to, right? That could be human capital, or that could just be systems at play that kind of do things for you, right? They're basically communication channels that allow you to understand perspective. So when you start to grasp that, you realize what kind of goes into, and again, forgive me for the caveman drawing. I know there's a circle thing there, but I went ahead and got creative one day. So basically what this implies is that if you have boss number 1 and boss number 2, in order for them to actually get messages across the team, they need to communicate either across the team or across each other. So for this one, we're going to open our mind beyond the primary colors, and see that there's an imaginary, sometimes real material communication line between one side of management to the other, right? So back to that piece I spoke about in terms of leadership, management, and then implementation. If you're in implementation, your focus is like right here, right? You're like, this is what I do. I'm responsible for this. I need to get this done. If you're on the management side of things, you're like, okay, I'm now taking responsibility or owning up, like taking ownership, I would say, of the responsibility. I then need to do better on my communication and my strategy. So if you can imagine, those are the two pieces. Strategy should be here. Communication should be here, right? So you kind of see the premise of how that moves. This, of course, is a very simplified scenario. The graphics you saw here. So you can imagine it gets more and more elaborate. If you don't have multiple direct managers, then you become a director. What does a director need to do? They need to communicate strategy effectively across. And that's what a real leader does, is they really illustrate very clearly what is happening now. And that's been mind-opening for me as I come to learn it. So when you're implementing intelligence systems, what you're really looking at is how can I implement new perspectives that I haven't seen myself. If I am in a position where I am just implementing, managing, which is a great position to be in. It's an amazing learning opportunity. The leadership piece, the directive of that, gives us more, I want to say, written permission or creative permission, if that makes sense, to create bigger than what we were currently thinking, which is an amazing thing. Like if you have a capacity to see that and then be able to bring that into reality through your imagination, not only do you have a real talent, but a skill that's in high demand economically. So with that being said, right, all of this fun theory stuff, when it comes to AI and using it as an intelligence system for agentic browsing, here's what that really looks like. So where does all this theory live? essentially not having control or even access to your own personal faculty of mind, your own way of thinking, your own kind of reflective capacity. Using intelligence systems is directly correlated to that limit, which is not a problem. Right? That's a muscle. That's something we work with, myself included. I'm currently expanding the way that I do that. So in order to do that, how do I orient myself? With the intent to produce something useful for as many people as possible. With that as my underlying intention, the work that I do has to be oriented by that North Star. I'm not creating AI slop, as they would call it. I'm actually creating real solutions that empower people, not just in business, but even in personal life. So how does that kind of, again, live within the AI space? Introducing Fellow. So Fellow is an interesting case study. They're not the first, but they are one of the first to be commercially available in terms of agentic browsers. If you're unfamiliar with agentic browsers, just to give you a quick little short history lesson, as of last year, actually a year and some change ago, browser use got an amazing funding seed and of course began to support all of these incredible companies. I got to see them from a very young, it was like a year and a half ago, where they were very much under-talked about, underspoken about, all the techie, like nerd, like, the people that were in it that were like trying to use AI within the browser, outside of vibe coding, outside of automation, but using AI to operate a computer on your behalf is a real art, right? And I just want to make that very clear, especially when it comes to getting attention to it, because you'll notice this surge in digital employee. Like that's the marketing kind of approach. Anything truly, like Lindy.ai, it's another one of these examples, is pretty much meeting your first AI employee, right? And all it is a AI agent that operates with the browser and runs autonomously. Whether or not it gives you visibility depends on what it's doing. Airtop.ai, $350 million funded company, they pride themselves in their ability to scrape TikTok and YouTube and like these typically hard companies to get information from. Typically if you're into scraping and market research, Appify was the place that you go to, especially when it comes to web scraping and marketplace, right? So I know I'm throwing a lot at you guys, but I just want to kind of lay the landscape. This is something that's been around for a while. What's different? Something called Echo. So Echo is essentially, as I kind of hinted to before, a layer of machine learning that watches and evaluates the computer use, right? So before, you just have AI that can use the computer, which is great. But we only have a certain amount of visibility. That's a real problem, right? So I think they actually had a good comparison graph here. Right? You're unable to actually intervene. You may not have the most efficiency in development because of that. One of the benefits, though, is it was open source. So a lot of great people that, I can name endlessly contributed to what you're about to see here. I want to keep a note. And this is something, again, that I kind of hinted towards in terms of displacement. But there's a famous, I'm going to reference, this is going to show the last piece of history from this little section, but where my inspiration came from to continue this. So if you're unfamiliar with a good amount of tech history, I say history, but this is really like 2 decades ago, which is crazy. Tim Peters, right? One of the biggest contributors to the development of Python and getting that accessible to engineers, really contributed to these guiding principles in terms of design and ways to remember how to orient yourself towards a good product, a good, piece of software that you're creating. I'm going to read it out and narrate it just for the effect, but you guys kind of get the grip. Beautiful is better than ugly. Implicit is better than implicit. Simple is better than complex. Flat is better than nested, right? So, kind of like the toggle list stuff. Sparse is better than dense. Think about focal vision. Readability counts. Special cases aren't special enough, I would say, to break the rules. A lot of the things we're doing are built on proper frameworks, right? So although practicality beats purity, errors should never pass silently unless explicitly silenced, right? Some things are just, noise. But in the face of ambiguity, refuse the temptation to guess, refuse the temptation to take shortcuts. There should be one, and preferably only one, obvious way to do things right. And if you move towards that, although it may not be obvious at first unless you're Dutch, that's more of the times. Now is better than ever. That still applies. Although never is often better than right now in terms of offloading things. If the implementation is hard to explain, it's a bad idea. If the implementation is easy to explain and I can do it with a bunch of charts, hopefully it's a good idea. And then namespace is one honking great idea. That's just, 2004 internet humor. What this speaks to is really a way of orienting yourself, and why that becomes increasingly important, especially as we navigate the landscape with agentic browsing. You'll notice something. A lot of the marketing that exists is along the same vein, meaning capabilities are not being embedded into pre-sales education properly. Let me take you through that. So notice that a lot of the marketing is speaking towards data analytics, market research, researching on behalf of you, which is not a bad thing, to be honest. I'll show you guys kind of what this looks like. Just sped up a little bit so you can see. But you're able to feed your resume in and it's able to actually go dig research on your behalf. Again, the disclosure in terms of credit usage is very cleverly hidden here. Without the $200 a month plan, which is the minimum for operating this, it's pretty difficult to get these results. Outside of that, you can do manual automations, which there are a number of communities, number of resources out there. I will have some as well within the 30-day program that kind of fit depending on your budget and access matrix, right? Like what you have access to. With that in token, the reason I'm showcasing this is because the next series of demos are all using this tool. And the reason being, like I mentioned, it's accessible. There are a number of other tools that I hinted towards. One that's actually competitive right now is Brainbase, Kafka, very much riddled within the digital employee, marketing side of things. But an enormous capability that I've seen is just this sort of UI that's very Notion-like mixed with ChatGPT and Bolt. Like it's more intuitive, especially from a client-facing standpoint. They have a minimum of $497 per seat, and then they have usage on top of that. So that's an example, right? Like this is commercially available. It's something that's becoming more and more in the hands of people, right? Before April 2025 of this year, this capability was locked behind 10, 20, 30K deal sizes. Salesforce, a number of them were also using this. So there's an enormous opportunity in terms of accessibility here, right? So all that to say, here's how to use this kind of new technology in a way that actually helps you. So let's get started. So head over to Untitled.ai and then go ahead and hit the download button at the top. Then choose the option that best supports you and your device. Once you've done that, you'll then see that you're greeted with 2,000 free credits, right? Like I had mentioned, I'm going to move this in a bit to kind of explain. The credit usage barometer on this is still something that they're working with. So highly recommend, if you're going to be using this to any capacity, go for the $200 a month plan, which I'll be able to showcase. But I'm just doing it with a free account just to show you it stays within limits, or at least I try to mitigate it. How do I do that? So good question. The way that I've approached it is by creating an assembly line project, essentially, a ChatGPT project. You can do this in any paid model. For this one's $20 a month. From there, you can go ahead, edit instructions, and add in a system prompt. What is the system prompt? So an agentic prompt workbench, essentially just improve the prompt that I have, my question. I fed it basically the echo documentation that I referred to earlier that best supports basically what I want to do. And the way that it does it, because you can spread this across multiple AI assistants, I've just done it in one shot. It creates a polished brief, which basically extracts what I'm asking into a brief document, right? So it looks crazy now, but all it is, what's the goal? What do I need to do it? What are the inputs? What's the human in the loop? What do I do if it doesn't work out? How do I basically mitigate that? It's asking itself the questions that I would already be asking 30 times every time I'm prompting, which is great, right? So in terms of context, it then creates a run card, which I read. It makes sense to me. It doesn't look like this. And I get to approve. From there, the third block is the actual run. Now it says sub 400 tokens. Like I said, doesn't always work. I've seen it go over it a number of times. But the more, basically it turns it into a specific prompt chain that you can kind of run with, and you can kind of just hope it stays within the credits. So for our sake and purposes with the free account, I'm just going to show you guys a few examples of what this looks like. So we're looking at fitness. So what I wanted it to do was to build a Mike Israetel leg workout. For those who know me, I broke my leg about a year ago, which kind of led me into going 9 to 9 on all of this crazy world of AI. This isn't accurate. I'm actually leaner now, but you know what? I pulled it in anyways because I'm like, you know what? Anyways. But basically what it's able to do for me is basically then generate and then match that workout thing into my Google Calendar. So I made sure I fed it everything it needed. And from there, the run card shows me what it would do to basically verify with RP Strength, which is Mike Israetel's blog. Again, you can plug this into any fitness trainer you'd like. And then from there, it was able to then extract and actually draft a plan. So what does this look like in actual runtime? It looks like this. So from here, I go ahead, throw this in. It then maps it out. So I'll shift this back again, just so you guys can see. Goes ahead, tries to understand what needs to happen, maps it all out, right? So from there, maps it into steps using its browser agent layer. Then with the file agent layer, it's able to understand, all right, what files do I need to make? It goes back into the browser to log it in and make it happen. So from there, I go ahead and hit run and see what it needs access to. So first and foremost, it's going to go ahead and do its research. It's probably going to need access to my Google. But while that's running, I just wanted to make something apparent. Fitness is just one example. There are a number of ways you can use this technology. And that's kind of what I'll be diving into back to back here. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, I'll be diving into fitness, nutrition, finance, productivity, forecasting, shortcuts with mobile, and then of course the business side of things with principles, organization, chart design, leadership, decision-making, management, decision-making, as well as offer map outs, offer mapping, I would say, in like ideal customer profile briefing, how to understand your market in terms of niching it in, also how to do that at pretty much any level of access and policy. From that, you'll be able to then understand what you need to do. I then have that program I mentioned. So that will be a diagnostic opportunity for you to pretty much work with me, work with the team over the span of 14 to 30 days and bringing it into reality. And there's a good guarantee on that pretty much the initial investment of 500, you should be able to generate if you follow the roadmap. That and then some more in terms of net new revenue. So I take you through the full way in terms of how to make money with AI in a way that's different. So let me make a note here while this is still running. Up until this point, people that make money with AI do it in the world of automation and software, which is great. That's a full economy of itself. It's a full market. What's undertapped and underused is this sort of browse on your behalf. Notice my hands are up. It's running. I can minimize this. I can go do other stuff. I've done this and then I go make a coffee. I can do this and then go fulfill client work. I can then work basically with the faculty of mind, knowing that these things are running and they're having the success that they are because I'm training it, I'm working with it. It's an intelligent system, right? So with that in token, and we're really into this kind of like theory mixed with AI that actually helps you and makes you, not just makes you money, but adds to the marketplace in terms of real value. Stay tuned because that's what we're going to dive into. It's going to go ahead and actually create its own environment, its own folder directory, which is nuts. You'll notice that other tools do not have this capacity to have their own navigation throughout their own file manager. That is something that I think sets this apart amongst many other features. So with that being said, I'm just going to speed up as you guys see this get done. So you'll notice at this current part, it's actually going ahead, creating the calendar. This is only possible because of tools like iCal, Event Maker, whatever. It's like it's only possible if somebody creates a website out of this. In terms of using applications and like interfaces, UI that is outside of the browser, it's difficult. So we're getting there. I want to say that Kafka and Brainbase are really scraping the edge of that. But in terms of this tool, the ability to browse the web autonomously is really great. You'll notice me kind of cleaning up some gear, cameras and whatnot on the side, because I've just been sitting here watching this run, right? Of course, I can do other things, but recording. So anyways, so you'll notice it's still churning its way through. Once it's done, I'll let you guys know how it goes. For those more interested on the technical side of things, you'll notice that it uses Playwright within different Chromium browsers, right? So it has its own individual window. Sometimes it'll show you in multi-tab. Sometimes it'll show you just as like actual multiple windows. It just depends on whatever it's doing, right? So if you imagine a thinking system as it's illustrating on the right, it's handling things in a queue and then using the tools it has access to actually achieve it, right? So it's a real thinking model that happens in lifetime. These things will only get faster, especially as it gets more practice. The processing of this, if hosted locally outside of this tool, even now, just like it existing as cloud, is using a good amount of CPU, right? Like it's, I want to say 15 to 20%. So that's not too shabby, but depends on your computer, depends on your operating, right? More. So here it is, the completed result. Took 12 minutes, 30 seconds. So you'll notice here is the full workout breakdown. And then also the instructions, basically everything that happened. Then it went ahead and it basically created it so that I can easily just schedule it in. From here, if you give it proper access, which I won't do because this is my actual, it's one of my actual calendars synced up. It basically can then go ahead, create each individual thing and then run for you. So that's an example in terms of fitness, right? Another piece, if I were you, I'd pay attention. This domain is about nutrition. So as you can imagine, with much like fitness, much like anything else, there are different frameworks that work the best for this, right? Depending on your own way that you kind of eat, you can take that, bring that to the table, and use what I'm about to show you. So in the same way as my previous breakdown of agentic browsing, you're able to have AI dig on behalf of you. So if you come to the table with an actual, useful prompt chain, a good assembly line, you can then actually have it research on behalf of you and ideate with you, right? In a collaborative way, as you would with an intelligence, right? That could be your chef intelligence, or sous chef, or like somebody that actually enjoys food, or is a foodie, as you can say. They'll be able to give you, in terms of specific knowledge, ways to improve this system. So here's what it is. And if you're new to this, check out the description for the full playlist walking through all of this. And again, the disclosure, this isn't medical advice. This isn't nutrition advice. Please speak to a specialist about it. But in terms of what it can do for you, let's take a look. So I'm just going to reiterate again how this kind of all comes together from the agentic browsing standpoint. If you're already familiar with this, you've been following up until this point, feel free to fast forward this part if you feel like you got it and you're just looking to actually just use it. But for those that need a bit more detail, the way that we approach prompt chaining, prompt engineering, whatever you want to call it, is by being able to leverage the foresight and strategy of how things actually execute. And the more detail and specific you can get in that, the more you can return something that isn't a mess. So the process of doing that is first polishing. All right, so I have a GPT system prompt, which will be shared with you guys in the school community in the description for free. And then from there, you'll be able to understand how to take that, polish it, get an execution plan, a card that you can actually follow and like visually approve, and then actually run it. Now, again, the common disclaimer that I've been giving, this token barometer is a feature. They're still tweaking inside of the platform. I'm going to be showing you guys one that actually shows the credit usage. If you're looking to actually use this in your production and full time, highly recommend going for the $200 a month operational plan. Again, not an affiliate, but we're going to be pretty much using Fellow just for these demos. There will be extrapolated resources available as well within the school community for you guys to download automation templates and actually build it using similar workbenches. But for those that just want something off the shelf to just kind of run with and use, that's what we got here. So the way this works is we're going to go ahead and for specifically what I'm trying to do, I'm going to go ahead and I've already researched on the side. I've fed that exact system prompt with what I wanted to do, which was basically create a shopping list that I can then go approve, run through. And I had it reduced down to just 2 friendly budget meals, specifically local to me. I gave it an example of what that looks like, and I have a whole bunch of links. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, copy all of that, right? Just so you guys don't have to deal with the labor of me fleshing it all out. From there, I go ahead and I let it run. So as you can see, it's planning, making sense of it, making decisions about, well, rather planning those decisions for what it needs to do. And then from there, it's able to deploy the different layers of AI agents that would then operate the browser and also operate in terms of the actual execution. So there's the planning, there's the actual implementation that's happening all in real time. So it's a good amount of steps here. I'm pretty sure this is going to go over the token usage limit, but I'm going to go ahead, let it run just to kind of showcase the idea. Like I mentioned, some of these, well, most of them do operate best with the 2,000 free credits that it gives you. You can schedule it out over the month. I also can shorthand this by feeding it a bunch of documents about these different diets and different limitations. This is just an example, right? So with that in mind, while this is running, I'm going to continue to do the same plug. Like I said, if you guys are already just kind of looking at this, seeing for what it can do, feel free to skip ahead. So with agentic browsers, one thing I've seen that's commonplace is hands-off and being able to trust that hands-off human in the loop. If you're familiar with the kind of the theory that I've shared here before, you'll know that like in order for systems to really work well, especially in production, that needs to be taken into account, right? There's no such thing as a full production, no actual hand or human in the loop. So with that in mind, you can see it digging. It's important to I gave it as many, websites and things that needed it to access. Giving it the ability to rationale and make sense of things is really cool. There's a whole movement, which I think is worth speaking about, called this right to repair movement, which for some, you probably heard about it mostly within the phone space. It's an interesting movement, especially in the world of AI, because when we speak about open source and accessibility, there's examples, for example, when it comes to ownership. Before, when you bought a book, you get to own that book for a lifetime. Now, lifetime is as long as the streaming agreement is in place, meaning you can buy Kindle books and or even what do you call it? Limited edition, thinking of examples. Back in the day when you would get a Blu-ray, for example, right? And it'd be out for a specific season. The equivalent to that now is like you get things during a drop and you get it at a discount, which is like not terrible. The whole premise of the activist movement behind it is basically to give people more power when things are being commercially taken from them. And it just goes on and on. I've been basically wrapping my head around that, especially when it comes to AI. Because most people see it as an ocean. Most people see it as something that's actually decently overt. So, here's simplifying it. So you'll see that I kind of jumped in with a few questions to make sure it wasn't, just running and drinking up the credits. You can just let it run again if you have the upgraded plan, but for sake of the free credits, I highly, highly recommend working alongside it. Don't just trust it to run autonomously, because you can speed it up. If you tell it here, go here instead of there, and just actually work with it, you can get places faster. So here it's actually deploying a deep search piece and then also actually calculating the macros and whatnot. So I'm going to let it run for a bit, but I'm going to keep an eye on it just to make sure I get the demo underneath the credit amount. And then from there to, again, here's one of the caveats with free accounts while this runs here. You can make multiple free accounts. Those are nearly infinite. It just requires a bit of more work to set up a Google account. That's it. Or just pay. That's the two options. All right, so instead of letting it run, basically here's what it looks like. It went ahead, created a cart for me, right? So I just got to go over it, basically approve it, Looks like I was following along on the recipes I asked for with a bunch of different options as well. I'm sure if I gave it a budget, it would have done more extensive thinking, more long-term running, but you kind of see the idea of what's happening here. So that's just another example of how this sort of agentic browsing can change things. It's worth mentioning many alternative ways exist in terms of automating and having AI do these things on behalf of you. But here's just a simple way to do it with language and pretty much running 24/7 or whenever you'd like for your role. So this piece with finance has a lot of different approaches. Again, just going to round back to showcase how this workbench really works in real time. When it comes to finance as a domain, our typical use case for AI is to help us do not just deep research, but also create profiles. So the way that I've kind of done it is I went ahead and I asked it that I want to create these paywall-free business and financials profile if I have access to things. What that requires is me to then know which direct registries, or at least official registries, I can depend on. Some may not be privy to that. So for yourself, for watching this, I'm going to go ahead and share that in the resources here. And then from that, you can also extrapolate from this. Apply your own methods. Honestly, I think a very hyper-personalized one to your industry is the best way to pull off a diagnostic. But if you're more so interested in just trying it for trying's sake, like I mentioned, I do have a program that'll help kind of walk through how to better understand the trifecta between an service offering rather, your ideal customer base, and then actually bringing that to market through a go-to-market strategy. That all being said, let's give this a shot. So I want it to essentially create a business and financials profile. The company that I'm going to go for this case is, let's go with Browser Use, recently funded. All right, so let's see what that kind of looks like. I'm gonna go ahead, let it run, kind of pull some deep research. It's gonna go ahead, actually extrapolate what the best approach is to doing that. Keep you conscious of the credits. I might just fast track through some of it, but there you go. So maps out what you got to do in the browser, or what it's going to do rather. Navigating through all these good old registries and extrapolating. Seems like a good amount of steps. So we're gonna go ahead, let it run, and just see what it does. So you see, to kind of cut it short, I went ahead and said, okay, cool, go dig for press releases. Because Browser Use is, a recently funded company. It's not IPO'd, right? But if you had a company that was bigger, they were researching, this would work just the same. I wanted to take it down the personalization waterfall of press releases and try to understand what's going on there. And I made sure to restrict it to just a few articles. So here, you'll see it in action. So as you can see here, it went ahead and produced a full-blown research report, citations and everything, also mapping out everything I need to know. From there, good old success. Didn't click through the usage credits as much, which is great. It's really like browser researching is the backbone for a lot of how this stuff works. So anytime you're doing that in any capacity, you're really playing towards its strengths. The next section here will be exploring some unexplored territory as of the marketplace. So this will be really exciting. Typically, the features I'm about to share with you, they have been behind a paywall. And now this is still sort of a paywall, but it's encompassing with everything else that we're doing. So stay tuned. Super excited for this. If I were you, I'd pay attention. So it goes without saying, the capabilities are now much more expansive than they have been before. So when it comes to traditional forecasting, that typically involved composing some sort of historical data, some sort of statistical approach. Now leaning on sort of these algorithmic machine learning models, they're able to run some sort of summarization, any sort of actual capacity handling with the information, and pull patterns, pull information from that you can actually use. One of the advantages of that is you have a bit of accuracy that normally would fall to human error before. There's increased accuracy because it sticks to the frameworks that it needs, right? So the adaptability to also pull in whatever frameworks, whatever patterns you have and provide it sticks to that versus veering off into imagination. That helps us, especially as we digest and pull apart larger pieces of information. This isn't anything new, right? That's been the case, especially for the last decade and some change. Having these additional layers speeds it up because now you have data pre-processing, data cleaning, training, especially on how to do that exists already and is freely available. And that allows us to then take this new sort of, call it a tank equivalent, and actually pull what we need in terms of time series, regression-based models, where we're actually able to see, what relationships are actually connected and linear versus approximal and estimated, right? So being able to ground what we're looking at in much more concrete networks, and see their actual relevance, right? See what's prominent, see what's connected. You'll notice that for this one, rather than showcasing you a demo, because I think it's much more valuable to understand your goals and objectives, your direction is more important, especially as we look towards how can we forecast in a way that's more utilitarian based, and from that, actually speeding up time within your process. So let's dive into that. So for this one, we're going to use an existing piece of intelligence, which is famously known as a transcript. With a transcript, you're able to do a lot, right? So there's a number of AI tools that exist, Cluely, Fathom, Otter, et cetera, that allow you to basically take a meeting and extract summary notes from it. Really great if you're doing high volume. So I have a transcript that I'm feeding into here, and I'm going to run it with another run, that run card rather, as you've seen in the previous videos with this Agentic browser. I'm going to go ahead and slap it at the top, and I'm going to have it create a decision brief with leadership, management, and implementation routing, as well as something called the Eisenhower matrix. So I'm going to dive into what that's all about, just kind of showing you how these frameworks really come to exist. So the transcript was with Brain-Based Kafka, so it was a discovery one, non-sensitive client information, which is great. Take you guys through it. So that in the transcript, threw in a run card, which will be shared in the resources, and I'm basically going to have it extract that content and then produce a Eisenhower matrix to explain what that's all about. So while it's basically getting ready for that, I'm going to go ahead and pretty much explain what that's all about. So first you'll see the browser agent. Let me just make sure you guys can see what's happening here. So it's going ahead, handling that file storage externally, right? Having its own storage management tunnel, if you can imagine that, as well as the actual browser agent that will navigate, work. First, it's deploying the file agent, right? And then extracting from there pretty much what it needs. So there we go. I could have attached it as a text file and probably would have saved it a lot of trouble. But I went ahead, it got what it needed, was able to extract what I wanted, and provided a full breakdown. So looking at this, interesting. Okay, it struggled to access. Good learning point. So let's fix that. I'm going to go ahead and going to add in a file. So I'm going to go ahead, create a new text document. Go ahead and test on this. Nothing too fancy. Again, you can save this in any capacity. I'm going to go ahead and copy the transcript, paste it in. So went ahead, added in the transcript as a file. Going to go ahead and hit enter on it, send it forward, and allow it to do what it needs to do. So there we go. Pretty much allowing it to get what it needs. And you'll see kind of the Heisenhower work in real time. That way I can actually walk you guys through really the framework, I would say, in terms of anchoring this and making sense of it. So it's going to go ahead and use the file agent to do that. And then the code agent will go ahead and actually scan it to create an actual brief, running logic behind it, of course. So I'm just going to go ahead and let that run. So you'll notice I requested a markdown format. Reason being, it's the most compatible with like Notion, Obsidian, GPT, whatever else I'm using. It's just the simplest thing to move from language model to language model. And if you're working with AI in any capacity, you probably have seen this kind of format. It's pretty clean. So from here, you can see it trying to classify, basically pull information into its different layers. So seeing what's a leadership decision, right, in terms of partnership. What's a management decision in terms of process? What's an implementation decision in terms of actual, what's going inside of the thing? And then the Eisenhower matrix gauges urgency, figure out what isn't urgent but needs to be scheduled, what needs to be delegated, and then what needs to be eliminated. That helps you basically really get concise and focused on what we're trying to do. I think that's one of the key pieces. So as this continues to run, you'll be able to see a full production version of it. It's continuing to run the rice analysis as well. More layers. And again, you probably won't need to do this for most. I'll say most, but it depends on the meeting, right? It depends what you're trying to do. In terms of a comprehensive process, like that's hard to say. It's a matter of like what frameworks do you actually want to integrate in towards what you're doing. That may not be all of this, which is okay. So let's take a look. See what we got here. Interesting. Broken down to the do first, justification and impact wise. Right? Pretty much positioning Kafka as a full-blown partnership, which is really exciting. Fingers crossed we can cross that bridge. And also seeing, in terms of the rice analysis, where does it score in terms of a pilot program, a vendor evaluation framework, right? So what needs to be done? How do we expand these services across the portfolio? And how can we actually make use of it? So there's another example. Again, just by running a simple transcript analysis with as many frameworks as you like. You can do this with as many language models as you like. This one you can kind of just set and run and trust that it will actually incorporate everything it needs to. And that's kind of the key advantages here. So now with the backlight and 3/4 way through, you get I want to say an illustrative canvas of different agentic solutions that kind of work for you. You've seen it mostly in the browser, the Agentic browser experience. You'll also see it in the automation, kind of like no-code development side of things. And then you could also see it in terms of what it is and what it can be, right? And I think when you start to look at it as an opportunity for workbenching and improving things, and I don't want to say industrializing because that feels dehumanizing. I feel like the more you can standardize high quality protocols and processes, the more you can get out of this stuff. And all the technical, fancy kind of jargon, fancy stuff behind it, stuff that kind of goes over your head, having not to think about that is really a great advantage. So, with that being said, there are three more principles I wanted to harp on before moving on to the last part of this whole call it opening production. Mainly focusing on organization design. So I have spoken about this in the past, but I wanted to harp on it again, especially in this specific focus. So what am I talking about? Talking about the world of enterprise design. There is a whole movement towards becoming sort of a holistic, collaborative design framework. Being able to transcend all these different echo chambers and limits and mitigating personalities and perspectives, being able to find connections over division, being able to lean on the design that helps us work better together. So there's a number, of course, TED Talks, all sorts of jazz about this. I just wanted to be really quick in terms of glazing over it. So this looks like a lot. I'm going to do my best to concisely get this conveyed in under 10 minutes. So, whenever you're designing a holistic enterprise offer, or I want to say service in any sense of capacity, what you're looking to combine is identity, architecture, and experience. Now, what are those three about? Identity is how you orient materially your purpose. How do you live that through your story? And how do you materially showcase that through your content, right? So this is an example of that. How well am I able to convey and communicate my mission and my experience in doing this, right? So with experience, what's really cool about that is often on the back end, what you guys don't see is there's journey mapping. There's different channels of distribution and surface area. And there's actual task, like an actual shot list, an actual kind of storyboard, as you see behind me here, that makes that possible, right? So experience is very much deliberate. And the only way it can be deliberate is if it's balanced with the back end of architecture. Now, when I say back end architecture, I'm not talking about it in the sense of software. I'm talking about it in the sense of business infrastructure. So processes that expand our capability, assets that increase our capability, right? And our capacity, I would say, to even execute on these things. So if that all sounds like great, fantastic stuff up in the air, in order to ground that, we really need to marry organization, brand, and product. Product takes many shapes. Software, right? Buckets of service, programs, right? You agree to purchase, transact, do something in exchange for something else. In that, what you're also buying into is brand, right? So what is happening with this? It depends as well on the type of purchase as well and what we're buying, but brand often conveys a sense of fortification, a sense of reliability. And the only way it does that is through the story of organization. And really great organization happens in the back, right? It happens behind the curtains, in the back office, where most people don't see it or get credit for. But really, it's the head of things, right? It's the Wizard of Oz effect. So where does this all live? Why is this all important? The reason why I'm bringing it up is because as we move into a place of organization charts and organization design, we start to explore a real limitation. And, this goes into that in a few ways. If you're interested in kind of diving into how people, outcome, activity, objects, how these things kind of feed in on an element level. For our sake and purposes, we're going to look at it in a more modular way. So what do I mean by modular, right? For some people, they hear that, they're like, all right, he's about to get scientific, especially with backlight. So backlight. Let me explain this. So 10 minutes on the time. I took 5 last time, so we're going to keep on that track. Organization charts. What's it about? So when I speak about modules, I basically mean compacting things into digestible bit by bits that you can work with. When it comes to designing organization charts, if you do this just by yourself without actually talking to anybody that this impacts, um, you experience that silo effect. You experience more overwhelm, disconnect, dissonance, all that fun stuff. When you modularize it, you create an environment in which you guys can collaborate. So for this case, this organization chart is using another browser agent tool and basically separating it across a legal firm in the realm of operations, finance, compliance, and data management. Right. So those four pieces that AI is actually touching, how do we ensure it's all nice and clean? So separated by the leadership level, by the management level, and then the implementation level, right? So starting from the ground up, we know that we want these things to be handled by AI. So when you combine them and you bucket them, you can then create a manager that actually works with it. So you'll see that's an opportunity with these agentic browsers. With automations, you can do the same thing. It just requires more time, more setup, right? I'll provide templates and resources in which to do so, but your quickest and straightest line path is with Fellow or Brainbase currently as of September 2025. So you'll see that kind of continue on, right? The human in the loop happens right before the management level, and then you kind of let it run and, ensuring that that management pulls it off well. You also would have noticed in the last few demos, if you're paying attention a little closely, that it evaluates how it's doing and how successful, and it catches itself if it's routing. Like it'll click in different areas nearby if it gets lost. That's not found in ChatGPT agent mode, Manus.im, or anything else here, right? For compliance, very intense, right? Regulatory requirements. We need to ensure those are all being communicated, especially through whatever channels the client is using. Those are all nice and easily integrated. Another piece too, the data management, very integral to ensure that the information is accurate, that it's being extracted from transcripts on a consistent basis. And you can set up an automation AI to do so. You can also just have a single tool like Fellow, like Brainbase, that handles that for you. So why do I show you this whole side of organization charts and leadership and management implementation? Because it can get quite elaborate. So this is another example by conducting AI. I'm sure you guys have seen this before somewhere in the realm of YouTube, where this gets a little bit elaborate, especially with sales and admin, marketing, product, back office, customer. These charts get real elaborate, but you see the separation that's happening. And they're doing this without even realizing these are the layers, right? Leadership, management, implementation. Their implementation, not to throw, bricks at any glass houses, but are separated, right? It's using relevance AI, right? You can swap out with Lindy.ai, right? You can just run these things with Relay.app, for example, and it's very isolated. The setup time, even just to set all of these up, right, is quite extensive. In fact, you can see all the different tools that it's actually integrating versus the other one, which was just communication. An example of what this looks like over time, right? This is over the span of 2 months, and it doesn't even touch pretty much the full development of these. But it showcases, right? You can build these truly anywhere between 4 hours to 2 to 4 weeks. It just depends on complexity, right? How well do you have foresight to pull the frameworks needed for these things, right? So that's where all these principles come into play. I'm mostly passing this forward to show the thought process, right? We don't just create these things and fingers crossed around displacement. Like that's not what we do this for. We do this because we're trying to actually implement things that help businesses. Right now, there's human capital that's doing these things. And if you provide them AI that works intelligently 24/7, you can actually get somewhere a lot quicker. So instead of this taking 2 to 4 weeks, it can be done within a week or two, and confidently, consistently. Like even though this is missing a bunch in terms of planning and scoping. Like if you have the opportunity to squeeze these all in, and then you can imagine what happens over the span of 4 to 6 weeks, you can transform a real business, right? And being able to then convince that business through the marketing of digital employees is quite the labor, especially when there's a number of different tools. Like having to explain to you why Relay matters, why Make matters, why OpenAI, Claude. Why not just use one, use both? Like, having to explain all those things is quite the amount of uphill for a solution specialist. So this simplifies a lot of things, right? It looks complicated here. I'm just showing you this. This is, I don't want to say archaic. This came out, what? Not more than a year ago, I would say. Probably a little bit around that. But these things allow you to simplify and explore what's possible. So those are organization charts. How do you go about creating these? So there's a number of ways. A common tool and resource, which I'll link below, is using something called mermaid diagrams. There's also frameworks that you can feed your GPT, which I'll also provide in the resources. There's the manual process, which personally I feel works the best. Of asking the right questions, being like, what do these people actually do? Right? Not what their bio says. What do they actually do? And I think the more we can get clear on that, and the more you have the consultative skill set in order to ask those questions and learn efficiently, these are amazing resources to have in your back pocket. All right, so now we're at the exciting part on the fourth quarter, pretty much of everything that I'm covering here. So now that you have a kind of landscape for organization design and mapping things out, let's get a bit more granular. So when it comes to service offering, how we actually exchange value in the marketplace, a lot of that happens to be intuitive. If you're just doing it and you're kind of just in the wheel of doing it. As an owner and operator, I understand that. Being able to extrapolate that, right, create a directive that AI can work with is often a labor of love, right? So what I have here is a resource that I'll share is pretty much a mapper that's plug and play, allows you to take any company URL or name, paste the details, whatever brief you can provide, and get a clean map of the current offers, classifies them into core, upsells, and retainers as per Alex Hermoldi's value equation, understanding pressure tests too, right? I'll then be able, well, not myself, but the AI agent will be able to provide upgraded offers, price bands, and guarantees that you can also use. I would say, not all, but a good amount of this is bells and whistles. Mostly, you'll be using this after the fact to feed it into a deep market research, which allows you to understand how that service will actually help people in the existing marketplace. And you'll be able to understand how to integrate that on a day-by-day real roadmap. So what does this look like? So for here, you're going to be fed in the resources, the starter prompt, where it will basically assess the promise, the price range, the time to value, the deliverables, the assets, the fulfillment, and all sorts of materials that it needs to know. It'll also have the grand old 6 golden questions to be able to figure all that out. Then we'll normalize that input, extract from public pages, run, classify, and actually get information that you can use. So from there, it will then provide 3 upgraded offers that you can use. You can run this in a chain of deep research prompts throughout ChatGPT, or you can use the same browser agent that I've been showcasing, and it'll actually help you map out pre-diagnostic what needs to happen. So it'll give you all of that, and then from there, you'll be able to take that, implement it into your run book, and run throughout the market. So let's do an example. So for yourself, you can go ahead, copy pretty much the whole brief, and if you've set up the GPT instruction as described earlier, you'll have a workbench which you can then paste it into. It then can take that and extrapolate. Like I mentioned, the usage barometer is still kind of tweaked, so this will likely run and just kind of keep running for a while. It's a lot of steps. It's a lot of deep research. But once you have kind of the full access to a scheduled, ongoing running agentic approach, you can just let it run. A little less plug and play. If you don't have access to that, you can basically funnel it in, which I'll show you, and run a deep research. Allow it to go dig, right? It's using AI on your behalf to actually extrapolate information that you can use. So there you go. It's getting the full run card, getting the URL or offer brief, normalizing it into JSON, and then actually running with it. So I'm going to go ahead. Again, like I mentioned, that 400 token promise is not a real promise, unfortunate. Not yet. So if you are using the free plan, do be conscientious before running this and cooking through your credits. So let's give this a whirl. Got 1,300 on this account left. Let's see what we can do. I did not give it that information. So there we go. It's asking for a company URL. Let's open one. So from here, I'm going to go ahead, let it run, prove the steps. While it's running, I think I'm going to go ahead and do a grok research, actually. Here's the thing, playing around all these free tiers, you got to get to see what gives you the most optimal output. Under the free tiers, grok is really exceptional at steep search. So I'm going to go ahead, feed it the run card that I was working with, and see what it can cook. So from here, this is the goal. Let's see. We'll let it run. In the meantime, you see this one also navigating, getting its information from wherever it needs. This one you notice is starting to dive, lose itself within the different pieces of search. Right, so this cooks through credits. Keep that in mind, right? This, it's planning its research approach. It's going ahead, it's sorting it out, and moving along. So you see how these different approaches work. This isn't just about agentic browsers. It's using AI to constructively help you build and understand and map what you're working with. So we know what we're looking to build. We're looking to really fortify this brief. So the brief that I shared, it's going to go ahead and output it in that format. It's fixed JSON schema, meaning it's fixed in terms of its output and what it can give you. With that in mind, letting it run, I'll see you guys in a bit. Keep in mind, like I said, with these deep research pieces, they can run. And it's important to kind of remember that as you're delegating and creating directives, is that you can do this on multiple pieces at the same time, right? Like I'm just doing this because I can share one screen at a time, but I can have this running as multiple instances, right? So grok here, this there, GPT over there, not a problem. And I think that's one of the key advantages of framing AI as these sort of intelligent systems and learning that you can learn through them, right? It's not just a search query. It's a real-time assistant. So while it's finalizing, I wanted to point out that sometimes language models will ignore you. This one, for this case, went ahead, gave me a full report, which is nice, but it didn't follow the schema that I wanted, right? So the schema is kind of the magic here. It standardizes essentially how things look in a way that you can use them from language model to language model, right? So it creates a sense of predictability. And as we work, especially within like CSVs and, more of these document-based tools, I think it's really important to keep in mind schema is really important. Some kind of veer outside of that, things get shaky. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to copy paste as well. So just take it into account. Go ahead, give it a print. This one, in the meantime, went ahead, actually cooked it up. So proper CSV. Once you download and kind of upload, you get to see what this looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and do exactly that. We're going to go ahead. I think I could even just copy it. So we're going to go ahead, extrapolate it, see what it looks like. From here, You could see it's kind of following a similar boat. This here gave me a lot of information in terms of what each offer is in terms of its promise. This is indeed one of the reasons I'm with them, bringing a guest anytime, 3 months by referring friends. This really does kind of encapsulate why go with Planet Fitness. And then in terms of deliverables, right, this is what they have to do to essentially achieve that. This is how they do it in terms of the proof and the price points. So very efficient. This one's doing something similar. Right, so you can imagine the detail. The more the merrier. And that's the idea. So taking that into account, let's move on to the ideal customer profile. So when I had first launched Plinko Solutions, one of the greatest advantages I got with exploring markets early was being able to quickly validate something and dig within whatever target I looked. So with property management, with software as a solution, SaaS famously, within especially real estate as a licensed realtor, this allowed me to really understand who I'm servicing and how I'm servicing them, right? So what kind of promises am I really making? At what price points am I making those promises? And back to that point about the time to value, right? So when you have that offer brief complete and you funnel it through that normalized point, you're able to search for something called signals. Signals, if you have paid access to certain tools, are a lot more, accessible. If you don't have paid access, you're mostly leaning on the ability to score the impact, basically information, right? So signals are just data points. How well are they willing to pay? What kind of fit do they have? What is their experience and their journey as they're discovering what you're offering them? How accessible is it to them? How much effort and thinking is required from them to, experience what you have? How do you source that, right? Providing a direct access point, having it research, dig it up, build those briefs, rank it, score it in a similar way. From there, you're able to build these sort of pain points and triggers that you can then evaluate against a success criteria. You can stack that in a way that you can access different angles, different assets, and essentially score overall the fit. So it works in the same way. I'm not going to demo it just for the sake of time and efficiency, but you kind of get the idea. Copy this in, copy the run car. The resources will be available. You can go ahead. This is all available for free. And from here, you'll be able to build a full matrix, essentially, for who you can help, how you can help them, and basically when to get started. So with that point, let's bring you guys towards the tail end of this. One thing to note that is not exclusive to Agentic browsers is a framework called NicheNet that I've coined and used. I've mentioned this in the past, but I haven't really explored it in a larger medium like this. What allows you to do exactly what I mentioned in terms of exploring niche, management in the US, sub 50 people, 50 team size. You can go more and more, make this more and more elaborate, right? But for sake and purposes, we're going to go ahead. I'm not going to do a deep research because it'll take a minute. But I'm going to go ahead and give it access to do so, just so you see kind of the framework and what it does. So the framework basically speedruns the need to prompt it 50 times to get to what you want. The resource will be available for you guys to use freely. From there, you'll be able to then funnel it into any language model, have it remember the framework, and then anytime you'd like to do research within that specific kind of parameters, this will allow you to do that, right? So if I run a deep research, this would run for like 15 to 30 minutes. So I've done that and I've gone to the gym and then I come back and it's great. But for the sake and purpose for the demo, just kind of showing you guys, we're going to go ahead, let it cook. And then after this, we'll move on to the access and policy matrix, and then also mapping out the diagnostic. There we go. So from here, we're able to see the pressure points. You get to kind of see how it works. This only works as well, by the way, in the niche snap, because I also have the angle of my service offering and what I'm doing. That's why it's important to kind of combine the two. So you can see basically how you can give them a return on investment. Right? So being able to position yourself and be a resource. Fantastic. Like, it allows you to understand what different touch points you need to do to actually explore personalizing, getting in touch, getting in reach. And really, that's all you can ask for when you're exploring a vertical is, how do these people talk? And how can you talk with them? You've just finished watching an exclusive preview to the 30-day program that's going to be released September 20th, 2025 for the Citizen Developer Project, focused on bridging AI and accessibility to you. So if you're interested in that, the link will be in the description. All the resources mentioned in this video will be broken down into actionable section by section blueprints, playbooks, all sorts of material you can run with. The program will run over the course of 4 weeks, every month, asynchronously and synchronously with you, with the additional support tiers that you can opt in for that will secure that guarantee, where you'll see 2 to 5 times return on the initial fee that you invest in. With that as well, there's a little breakdown of all the support tiers, which I'll dive into in a bit. With each path comes its own benefits, depending on what you come to the table with and how you perform on the diagnostic, which can be found within the school community. You can then see which path makes the most sense for you. We'll also work with you closely to ensure that that success is palpable and very much written. Regardless of the support tier that you're in, or whether you decide to pay and work with us or just get a taste of the program itself, everybody gets access for free to a core starter pack, which includes a program map, templates, and link hub that's competitive, holding everything to where the market is currently as of September 2025. You're also provided a tool and access policy matrix, which was mentioned earlier in the video. You're also provided a tracker for run logs, scaffolding with the team, context dictionary so your AI works relentlessly, and then revenue playbooks. You can actually see tangibly how we make money using these things. And then also you'll have access to standard operating procedures in which you can take yourself and work with clients. And again, all available to you for free. You're also provided a workshop lab style for creating assets that we use within our program to actually bring your work to the market and service people as effectively as possible. There's also an additional prompt vault that you'll have access to, as well as consultation for legal and compliance if you need it, and more to come on the school game challenges that are coming in the next trailing 30 days. Each path is also given a tailored starter pack in which you'll be able to plug and play and really see results. We created this in mind with the different support tiers, that regardless, no matter where you show up in this journey, you'll be able to access. We really created this program for you so that you can get to take advantage of agentic browsing and AI that works for you 24/7 and with you, right? And understanding how to approach that from an intelligence standpoint, which currently is being under talked about. Most people approach AI for shortcuts, for tools, for things. This is a full resource workbench and hub in which you as a citizen developer can see results and return time where it matters most.